we'll jump into our last module of specific road users. So we've got the two-wheeled variety today. So we're going to talk about cyclist considerations and pedestrian, and no, not pedestrian, motorcyclists. Sorry, I got distracted by our AI that appears every session. So Loretta, I'll let you deal with that. We kicked the AI out for everybody. Everybody else, just to let you know. So cyclists and motorcyclists. So we've talked about pedestrians. We had a good discussion last session about pedestrians, and we've been talking about cars, safety for vehicles. We talked about heavy vehicles. Jamie had a sort of good discussion around some of those considerations for heavy vehicles. So this will round us off nicely. And at the end of this session, we are going to give you your mock road safety audit to do. So you'll actually get that design. You'll get a site close to your home or your office or whatever address you gave us, and we'll give you some other documentation, and then we'll be sending you off to do a mock road safety audit. So you're going to have a little bit of work to do after this. But let's start with cyclists. Maybe give us a thumbs up thing in the reaction if you are a regular person that rides bike, if you're a regular cyclist. See if we get some interaction out of people. Yeah, Kurt's popped his hand up, or maybe the only one who's a regular cyclist. Oh, there was a thumbs up. Yeah, I thought maybe people were trying to find the thumbs up. Usually we have auditors that, well, you know, in an audit course like this, we have a handful of regular cyclists, and at least the bulk of people have ridden bikes in the past, at least. So we have some good sort of experience from that perspective. And this module, though, is about identifying some of the requirements for cyclists for safe travel. We're going to talk about some of the technical information regarding cycle paths, shared paths, different cycling facilities, on-road stuff, on-street stuff. And then, as we did with pedestrians, we're really going to sort of hone in on some of the typical things we might find in road safety audits associated with the safety of riders, and some of the different treatments and some of the specific things to look at, or the terminology around different treatments. So at this very sort of high level, we could think about some general safety requirements for cyclists. And ideally, we have this separation. We have clear sight lines to the riders and for the riders. We have space to ride. We have a good surface, which is smooth, but has still a good skid resistance. We have speed maintenance. I'll explain how that links in with safety later. So that's ensuring that the riders continue to maintain a certain speed throughout. Connectivity of facilities is a big one, and information where we need information. I do like this sort of statement, think like a cyclist, and that can be quite easy for some people who are regular cyclists. So of course you're thinking like cyclists, others who have ridden, but sometimes you know, maybe if you are not a cyclist or you haven't had any real experience riding, you might want to ensure your road safety audit team includes somebody who is a bit of a regular cyclist or really understands how cyclists would use facilities in a realistic perspective. There is the temptation to of some auditors to say, well, okay, we've done that, so that's what a cyclist should do. But we really need to say, what will they do? Not what should they do, what will they do? But these general questions that just Dot pointed a few of them down the bottom there. If I was riding this, would I feel safe? If I turned there, would a car see me? Am I in the dooring zone? Lots and lots of questions you'll ask yourself. And there are lots of questions in the prompt list at the back of the Austroads Guide to Road Safety Part 6, which you can have a look at. But what is a cyclist? Or as a lot of the groups like us to use the term, people that ride bikes. Some groups say that the term cyclist sort of dehumanizes the people involved. I'm not sure I quite agree with that. I mean, I think it's fine for us to talk about cyclists, but it's just something I found interesting to note. But one way to think about cyclists is the 8-year-old and the 80-year-old. And if we're providing facilities that cater for the 8-year-old and the 80-year-old, we're going to cover off everybody in between. That's a general design philosophy, 8 to 80, it's called. It's that your city should be designed for an 8-year-old and 80-year-old to be able to safely and freely use it, and then it should be safe for everybody. I would say this works for a lot of the cycling community, but not all of it. Cyclists are quite a varied breed in the sense that we have these types of cyclists. We have commuter cyclists. We have recreational cyclists in a number of different forms, the lycra-clad training cyclists. We have people out on the adventure rides and the like. We also have the emergence of cargo bikes, so people transporting stuff on bikes. We have e-bikes coming into the mix, which is which changes the dynamic slightly. So there is quite a varied cohort when it comes to thinking about cyclists. And our challenge often as auditors is to navigate through that little bit of a web there. But we do have the advantage of quite a bit of guidance for what to think about as road safety auditors for people that ride bikes, and also design guidance, which I'll show you shortly. But I mentioned before that the back of the Austroads Guide to Road Safety Part 6, Road Safety Audit, covers off walking and cycling in its distinct prompt lists. So going to the back there and using those prompt lists, you will be forced to think about cyclists, and it'll guide you in some of the thinking. I popped in here this Shared Path Audit Guidelines, which is a document done by Vic Roads about 10 years ago or so. Okay, it's consistent with the general methodology of a road safety audit, but it hones in a little bit on some of the shared path specifics. I've got a section at the end of this little presentation about shared path auditing and some of the things to look at, but it's worth noting that that's there. Then when we get into the standards and guidelines around cycling infrastructure, the Austroads Guide to Road Safety, the Austroads Guide to Road Design, Part 6A, Paths for Walking and Cycling, it's a really good resource. It's got a lot of good information in there. This grey document, Cycling Aspects of the Austroads Guide, was an interesting one that was picking bits of the various Austroads guides. So that's the Guide to Road Safety, the Guide to Road Design, the Guide to Traffic Management, that particularly related to cycling and providing cycling infrastructure, planning, design, and trying to pull them all into one document. So it's a handy resource if you're playing in that space. There's the Australian Standard, so 1742, Part 9, which is bicycle facilities. And then jurisdictions have a lot of different supplements. I popped on there some of the Victorian supplements, the Traffic Engineering Manual, for some specific topics, treating dooring areas, bicycles and roundabouts, strategic cycling corridors. There's a nice little City of Melbourne bike lane design guidelines document. TMR in Queensland has some really good resources associated with cycling facilities, supplements, and particular design papers. And then if we drift outside of Australia, we see lots of other audit reference guides, design manuals for cycling, and one of them that is really considered one of the Bibles of road infrastructure design for bicycle safety and bicyclists and encouraging riding is the Chrome Manual. I'll give a prize for the person, get some prizes going. The person who can tell me what country the Crow manual's from. I said these are from different countries. Anybody got an idea there? The Netherlands. Stephen's on it. Correct. It is from the Netherlands. Sorry, I lost my chat for a second. That was why there was that big pause. The Netherlands, yes, they love a bike in the Netherlands, and they produced the Crow manual. And yeah, you will discover that a lot of other countries around the world have taken the Crow manual and adapted parts of it for their jurisdiction. Some different audit guidelines and practices from other countries, I just pop in there for your reference as well. Okay, let's get into some of the issues. And I'll pop this first one up. Common road safety audit finding. Number one for bike riders is what I refer to as longitudinal grates. So this, and I think the picture tells the story, doesn't it? A bike tire dropping into a longitudinal grate. Now that one sort of small-ish. We certainly see bigger ones than that, and longitudinal meaning running along, the same path of travel there. Now, this is one that's, this is an issue for bike riders and not too many others. Okay, maybe a pedestrian slight issue, possibly. I mean, I think any grate could be a slip hazard and the like for a pedestrian, depending on its placement and the like, or people in high heels or anything like that. But this is a real specific issue for people that ride bikes. Now, do I see in designs people, putting in longitudinal grates in new upgrades? No. They use cycle-friendly grates if they need to from this perspective, or they alter the design of the drainage facility. But where I do see this pop up a lot in road safety audits is that there are changes to a street or a road or an intersection, and within the changes, there's nothing changing the longitudinal grates that exist. Now, sometimes those changes are encouraging more bikes, or it's just a great opportunity. Excuse the pun there. It's a wonderful opportunity to change this to a cyclist-friendly grade. I've done 2 expert witness cases associated with longitudinal grades where cyclists have been seriously injured. One, public road network, and changes had happened. The other was associated with a shopping centre, big shopping centre. They'd done some expanding of the shopping centre. They'd added in lots of bike facilities, bike parking, little bike maintenance station. They'd put lots of wayfinding off shared paths that run parallel to the shopping centre, how to get in, trying to encourage the bikes. So it was all part of them, making sure their facility was doing the right thing from that perspective. Unfortunately, the route that they directed all the bikes through off the shared path went straight through part of their car park that just had continuous longitudinal grates. That was never sort of thought about or picked up within any of the process of their design or their changes. So us thinking about these and in both those cases, I sort of said, well, I've been teaching the road safety audit course for a very long time. And when I talk about cyclist safety, the first common finding I put up is a longitudinal grate. It's 101 for issues for cyclists in the public road network in terms of it's obvious it's for them. It's not the biggest killer or seriously injuring aspect of infrastructure for cyclists. However, it's a very obvious one. Here's a less obvious one, which requires you to get out and look at the signal phasing. Again, this is not the biggest, source of death or serious injury for cyclists at all, but it's an interesting one And it reinforces our need as auditors to get to the site and to watch it, to look at it, even if it's a design. This one, the red arrows show the signal phasing, essentially, where they'll do as vehicles come up Blythe Street here, up Blythe Street here, they get a green so they can turn into Sydney Road. But the vehicles here, they get a left turn green arrow. Now, this design, this proposal is putting in some green paint at green pavement markings at conflict points, some threshold treatments on side roads, but also adding bike storage boxes at the front. And a bike storage box is an area essentially where there's, traffic queued up at a signalized intersection. Cyclists should be able to get a bit of space in front of traffic to be clearly seen, to be able to get out ahead of the pack and get a nice bit of a run so everybody sees the rider. I've got one proposed there. Now that becomes an issue because cyclists may be storing here and then a vehicle coming up behind will see a green arrow. Will a driver sort of completely miss a cyclist that's directly in front of them? Highly unlikely, right? Very, very unlikely that they're going to miss that cyclist. They're right in the middle. But, it's not good. We don't like it. It's going to cause other issues. Probably going to cause road rage. Certainly, they'll be beeping, get out of the way. And became an interesting one to sort of risk rate this because you're going, well, our job is to talk about death and serious injury associated with road crashes. Road rage is not our concern as such. Anyway, we ended up sort of more focusing on, okay, well, what's the driver going to do? They're going to go around, aren't they? And that could cause issues for possibly sweeping past the cyclist, swept path of vehicles, going into other lanes and these sorts of issues. Anyway, those sort of things get rectified very quickly anyway. So this is not a poll. This is going to be for you to have a look at this site and type into the chat issues you see for cyclists associated with this shared path facility crossing a road. Type them in the chat and I'll give a prize also for anybody that can tell me what country this is in, just as a little bit of an extra opportunity for a prize. Oh, Nick, well played. It is Wales. And Nick also gets a prize. We'll give you one prize for two things there, Nick. One being that you got the right country. And the second is you identified the longitudinal grade very quickly, which is not a longitudinal grade for a cyclist going that way, is it? But right on the cycle path, it certainly is. So good spotting, good keen eye. So getting lots of really good things coming in there. So Joel very quickly onto it, talking about the fence and visibility and sightline issues, as Richard was talking about, and Eli as well. And Mal, so lots of people onto that one. Yeah, we had the longitudinal grade. Some people now talking about sort of fixed hazards within the cycle path, these poles, these posts, and Les sort of popping quite a few of them in there, talking a bit about the uneven surface as well with the tactiles. So you can see lots of different things there. So longitudinal grade, certainly that should be fixed. And there's a good example of where they certainly haven't really thought about that, even though this is a dedicated cycleway. Richard's got an interesting comment there around right of way. Is it clear who's got priority, who should be giving way? And I like Sim's point there around how slippery is this surface going to be when it's wet, thinking about it in other conditions and the like. Let's go back to talking about this sightline, this fence and this obscured sightline. So we want to provide drivers with the opportunity to see a cyclist approaching and the cyclist to be able to see vehicles approaching. And this has not been met with this fence. But obviously somebody has identified that and they've put the old cyclist dismount sign up. Now, this is where I go back to what I said earlier. Understanding not what should cyclists do, but what will they do is important. Do cyclists dismount when there's a cyclist dismount sign? No. I mean, that's a pretty useless sign. The reality is cyclists are not going to dismount. You can put that up as a traffic engineer or the like to try to make yourself feel better because there's an issue there. The reality is it's not doing it. It's a useless sign from that perspective. There's an example of the height of ridiculousness associated with cyclist dismount signs, in my opinion. Of course, a cyclist is not going to be getting off the bike, walking, getting on for 10 meters, getting off, walking, getting on for another 10 meters. That's just wasting signage. And yeah. So let's go back to this. And Mal's come up with one possible way to try to lessen the risk as opposed to just putting up a sign. So let's have a little bit of a think about some more ways we could do it. Okay, first thing I would say, is there a possibility for us to, cut some of the fence out like that, open up those sidelines? Okay, there might be challenges associated with private property and these sorts of things, but I like it to be considered there as an opportunity. So cyclist hoops is an interesting one, different configurations on it, but essentially what we're sort of doing is creating, I'll use the whole facility, even though that'd be, sort of creating this facility where, the riders would have to go in and left and then that really slows them down. Now, cyclist design guides are really pushing against this. They don't want this. And this comes back a little bit to that speed maintenance. They're not, it's impacting on that. It becomes hard for some of these larger bikes, cargo bikes, big, long e-bikes and things to be able to get through some of these. Are there other alternatives, which I think is always worth looking at? There are bigger picture things you could do. You could, have the path go around the other side of this shed. We need a bigger picture aerial view of this. So that would be a bigger bit of work, but it certainly would open up some of those sight lines from both directions, actually. So that's one possibility. We could signalize this. We could, to lessen risk, possibly change priority, raise this crossing, and very much slow vehicles down approaching. Now, you'd still have a sightline issue, but the idea being hopefully that you could slow vehicles down to this very slow pace at that particular point. That'd be an interesting one to scratch your head and get out there and decide whether actually that decreases risk or increases risk. And I think you'd need a bit more investigation on that. I mean, yeah, if we're not constrained by anything, overpass, underpass would be absolutely lovely. And certainly in the Netherlands and other areas, those sort of things are very much used. And it'll be great to see that thinking and deploying of that in Australia and New Zealand as well. Yeah, so it can be a little bit challenging. But certainly there are options there for us to reduce risk. One that was somewhat similar, and I thought I'd pop it in as an example for a few reasons, was this audit that was being undertaken is a post-opening road safety audit. So that means that the infrastructure had been built and then the team was asked to go in and undertake a road safety audit after it's been built to see if there are any issues. Now, it's for a new subdivision, quite a big subdivision, and you can see that the footpath has been designated as a shared path. So it's signed and lined as a shared path facility. But what's happened there in some situations, high fences, garages, and shared path facility. Oh, sometimes my pen has a mind of its own. So you can see there that there is the possibility. In fact, we're encouraging cyclists to use this bit of road, and they may be traveling at 20, maybe 20, 25 kilometers an hour. Now, I say 20, 25 shared paths, and this sort of narrowish shared path. I think that's a sort of reasonable speed to be thinking. On-road cyclists, you can think up to sort of the 30-ish kilometer, or dedicated cycleway, 30 kilometers per hour is generally sort of what we see. But that's an issue there. So the audit team reported on that, and then made these comments. Okay, well, consider fence cut downs like this, and that would lessen the risk. So supporting treatment. It's not going to eliminate the possibility of this, but it's certainly going to lessen the likelihood of it. Now, interesting one on this was that the client came back and said, thanks for the audit. This was one issue of a handful or so. They said, thanks for the audit, and yet we see what your issue was around those fences. Unfortunately, that's part of the planning design guide for developments. It was approved. That's what it is. Can you take that audit finding out, please, and reissue the report? And this is where you get in sometimes this awkward position as an audit team or an auditor, where it's annoying for your client, essentially, or it's something that they really feel they can't do anything about. But your obligation as an independent road safety audit team and auditor is to report on what could contribute to death and serious injury for our community. And it's not about getting rid of them if they're hard to do. The answer to that is, sorry, we've got to leave it in there. This is your opportunity to write any reasons, you can or can't do anything, but it'd be nice for that to happen. Now, I'm always open for them. Jump forward. I'm always open for them if they want to question things or question stuff. I'm always, especially if they've got other information, or they know something that I don't, or the audit team doesn't. Great, tell us about it. We'll consider that. But asking us and telling us to remove recommendations is unacceptable, and that's where you've got to push back. Surface treatment, surface, grates, pits, big potholes and these sort of things. Okay, certainly there is the one risk, which is that cyclist hits it, comes off their bike, injure themselves hitting the ground, or they're struck by another passing vehicle. The other is also associated with cyclists altering their riding line to avoid and maybe putting themselves in more hazardous locations. So one thing that's always interesting as an auditor to look at is the alignment of lanes through an intersection. This is an interesting one. You can see that you've got a through lane here that kind of lines up with the footpath, and you've got a through lane here that sort of lines up with the left lane, doesn't it? And this is a sort of classic scenario, and we see this sort of pop up often, and we know we're going to have sideswipe crashes there between passenger vehicles, because somebody will be driving along in the sort of right-hand lane that goes through, thinking that they're going into this left lane, and somebody will be coming in here to try and get in, and there'll be some sort of, sideswipey crashes going on here. So that's one risk, certainly, and you'd be documenting that. The other is, though, to think about riders. Like, okay, a bike rider's coming up here, and then, well, good luck through the intersection. There's actually a pretty cool US NACTO guide called, it's actually titled, Don't Give Up at the Intersection. That's the title of the Cycling Infrastructure Design Guide. It's all about intersection treatments, because this is so common that they've provided some facility, even though we'll have a talk about the deficiencies of that facility, up to this point, and then just gone, we give up. And cyclists, you can fend for yourself. Well, cyclists is now going to sort of have to take this. But as they go through here, this is where it becomes really problematic. You've got a mess of vehicles and the bike rider, and they're the ones that are going to be more injured. So what we sort of try to look at is more our protected intersection type treatments. Ideally, you're getting the bikes off. Ideally, we're pushing the car parks out, got the bikes running curbside. They can then utilize that sort of arrangement and get back on somehow. That's ideal. It can be pretty challenging here. You can have head starts for bikes. Lessening the risk to a degree also are RPMs, not RRPMs. RPMs with raised pavement markers. They're more like a dome as opposed to that squarey RRPM look. And they're sort of lane, you put them in the appropriate spots to delineate a particular lane choice. A similar one also on that exit, it's very challenging where a car, we've got essentially an intersection here where you've got sort of parking, then it opens to a stand-up lane. So this is, we really got one lane of traffic, but then at the intersection, they open it up to two. So you do that often just to get more flow through your intersection. At the start, everybody flows through and then they file back into one lane. But as this driver's coming up to the parked vehicle, as the driver's coming up to this parked vehicle here, their attention is very much on their merge back in, and any cyclists in the area can be at a bit higher risk. Okay, let's talk about roundabouts. So cyclists at roundabouts, fascinating topic. And I'm going to take you back in time, and the original, as people got aware that cyclists were not faring that well at roundabouts, the first design guidance back was to provide a cycle facility, a bike lane, and try to do everything we can to encourage cyclists to get out of the way. Try and stick to a line as far out as you possibly can. Now, this has caused a number of road safety issues. And one of them is associated with vehicles then see this opportunity to overtake. Okay. Most of the time they do that successfully, but it does create times when cyclists are clipped going through, or certainly a cyclist that's trying to make that turn. We've got this nasty conflict point there, and they've come from that spot on the outside. The second issue is a phenomenon called look but fail to see. That's where a car coming up to here looks out this way, and they don't have any sightline impediments. So they can see clearly so they're coming along here, they look out here, no sightline impediments, a bike's coming along here, and then the bike goes in and the car drives straight into it. It's called a look but fail to see. And the behavioral psychologists just love analyzing this. And people have done their whole PhDs on this, and there's a whole lot of literature. You can read up on it a lot. And the reason they're so fascinated with it is why would a driver who can absolutely see a cyclist coming in still go in and hit it? They're not doing it intentionally, but something's going on. And it's all about a driver, approaching here, and their cognitive processing time, essentially. Now, as they approach, they're looking out there for cars. So they're not looking for a rider. And in fact, the spot they're looking is out here. And just the fact that the bike is in a slightly irregular position just takes longer for them to process. They have to stop for that as well. It's all happening, subconsciously. So that's one. There is talk of, in the behavioral psychologists, human factors experts talk about threat theory, that this is a threat to them. This is not a threat to them. So again, it just slows the cognitive processing on bikes. Again, they're not consciously making that call. Oh, that's not a threat, I'll just plow it down. No, of course not. It's all just subconscious stuff, which is kind of fascinating. But anyway, then they evolved the design guidance on these urban one-lane, lower speed roundabouts to say, at this point back here, we will encourage the cyclists to claim the lane, to move into the middle, so no vehicles can overtake, and so they're in a better position to be able to be seen by a vehicle approaching here. And they use these treatments. Prize for somebody who can tell me what that thing is called. What's that marking called? If somebody knows that. I may have stumped everyone, or they've gone off and got a coffee. Eli's on it. It says Sharrow. Well done. Sharrow. It's a mashing together of the two words shared and arrow. It's trying to indicate a space on the road where a bike and a car could share the same spot. So that's the next evolution of design guidance of these single lane urban roundabouts. If we go back to our 8 to 80 principle, are you going to let your 8-year-old or tell your 8-year-old to go and claim the lane? Probably not. So maybe we're only catering for some. It does seem to improve things a little bit. It's extremely challenging and problematic, though, for 2-lane roundabouts, because you can't really encourage that lane claiming in these higher speed environments. Plus, you've got that turn requirement that is going to have vehicles crossing it. You also have a dynamic visual obstruction challenge associated. I'll draw that for you just because it's an important one to think about when you've got cyclists coming up in these arrangements. So you often have, a vehicle there. You've got a cyclist ticking along through here. Another vehicle coming up here. And of course, their vision's blocked by that. So they will continue on, so wondering what this person is stopped for. And we've got that crash conflict point there. So quite a number of challenges for bikes at 2-lane roundabouts. What we encourage, in all of these roundabout scenarios as our sort of best practice is that full separation, full circulating carriageway for riders outside of the circulating carriageway for vehicles. So in a 2-lane one's problematic. This is a concept design done by some of our design engineers around, having a path that separates and crossing facilities and angles of crossing points. It's going to improve things. It's not perfect. Certainly the Crow manual would talk about grade separated facilities when you're at the 2-lane roundabout phases and having cars having to go over or the like. But for those single lane facilities, the ultimate, the Rolls Royce, the gold standard is in a similar vein, that separated circulating carriageway where cyclists approach. They have their own dedicated facility to go around, and they can do their right turn that way, or they could continue on. They're out of the way from that vehicle interaction. They have raised treatments to ensure that priority. Nice setback is good here. Enough space for a car to prop there rather than having to prop on the lane. Well, a few little sort of nuances, but really those sort of facilities are wonderful. And there's a picture of one built down there. It's in South Melbourne, Moray Street. For those who know the area, but you can see it provides pretty good facility. We did have some cameras out there for a couple of weeks to monitor driver behavior, rider behavior, walker behavior, how it all worked. And surprisingly well. We had about 90% of cyclists use the facility. The other 10% did just carry on through the roundabout as normal, but that's pretty good. Right, we had a lot of good vehicle compliance. Most vehicles would sort of pause back here as any pedestrians or cyclists. Then they would make their next little bit and they'd prop here, and then they'd go when they could, and the vehicles coming out would prop here, and off they would go. Occasionally we had a bit of queuing on the crossing, and certainly when you had vehicles with trailers or trucks, they were blocking the crossing a bit. It was we saw that as a fairly low risk thing, because when you did have those longer vehicles that sort of went over that, the riders sort of meandered their way around or waited, and it wasn't ideal, but it certainly presented a lower risk than any of the higher speed incidents without this sort of treatment. So as we have continue to try harder and harder to facilitate cyclists and provide these safe areas for riders, we're going to see a lot of treatments come in thinking about riders. Our job as road safety auditors is to think about the safety of everybody, and certainly cyclists are part of that. This is an interesting one where I'm particularly interested in this little bit here. So it was trying to provide a facility where cyclists could pause, almost like do a hook turn, wait there until vehicles coming through here had gone, and then make their next step there. I think that presents a few challenges. I mean, the area here is fairly dominated by the lycra-clad cyclists, sometimes called the mammals, the middle-aged men in lycra, which I'll put my hand up. I'm one of those occasionally. So so this little mammal pouch, as my colleague referred to it, wouldn't quite cut it with a pack of cyclists because they're going to be spilling out. The other one is interesting around sort of swept paths of larger vehicles, how larger vehicles might track around there. And is that the best place to store a vulnerable road user? So these sort of things we can inject in as auditors and help them in their consideration of the safest way to treat roundabouts for riders. And this one, I think, was actually a pretty good attempt. This one had the advantage of being a roundabout at a T intersection, but to try to cater for the main cyclist thoroughfare, which is riders going straight through, they provided this separated facility off the roundabout that just continued through. And so that's all pretty nice. And looking at it from a design, you go, yep, it's all looking really good. Now, when they built it, yeah, they certainly built the facility. But for me, looking at it, I go, is it actually clear this is for cyclists? I think me as a rider, I'd probably ride up to this and then I'd just go into the roundabout and think, I can't go on the footpath, or or it'd be slow on the footpath or a challenge, so I'll battle it out through the roundabout. So almost all of that investment is a bit wasted. I think just a small bit of green marking like that, just up onto the facility, that really would have enhanced the use of this and the safety of this intersection for riders. That's not the traditional use of green marking. Green marking was initially, came about to mark the conflict point between a vehicle and a cyclist, to highlight to a driver, hey, you're approaching a spot a cyclist could appear from. That's what its use was. It evolved, and it's slightly sometimes used now a little bit to guide where you'd like cyclists to go, like this one. It's sort of trying to guide across here. Maybe, I mean, there's a little bit of conflict point between pedestrians and cyclists there, but that's really trying to guide to encourage cyclists to go and use the underpass as opposed to navigating through this intersection. Okay. The dooring is that term that's emerged to describe the crashes associated with people opening their doors in front of cyclists and cyclists hitting the door and injuring themselves that way, or hitting the door and falling into traffic lanes and being struck by moving vehicles through. And we certainly see fatalities associated with this and serious injuries, both from hitting the door, but also landing in the moving traffic lane. And to treat this is kind of problematic in some areas, especially a problematic where you have these sort of clearways, because if this is Sydney Road, I mean, if we were to do lots of marking on here to identify, it could be green marking again or whatever it is, and trying to create these facilities from that perspective, during part of the day, this is the middle of a running lane. That's a clearway. That's what it is. So it becomes hard from that perspective. And this is where you have to really start to rejig your whole cross-section and your whole configuration. Where there is permanent parking, so this is not a clearway, you can see they've gone and been able to mark cyclist lanes and cyclist areas. But this rider is clearly still in the dooring zone. And in fact, this is the site of a cyclist fatality from dooring, where a door was opened in front of a cyclist who struck the door, landed in the through lane, and was run over by a truck and killed. So this is definitely not without risk. The gold standard in this environment is to push your parking out to this is what we call a Copenhagen style lane. And you can see there that we provide these separators, and you make them like as much width as a door would open. And then the cyclists get their area protected from moving traffic through, protected from doors. And they're left with the big challenge, though, which is vehicles turning in and not seeing them, or coming out and blocking their way or the like. So that's one thing. If you're auditing one of these facilities, which have great safety benefits, think about the sight lines and the way you treat the entry and exit point. One little thing that I like to do in the design of these is to take that area and really cobblestone it, or put a raised feature there to slow the vehicle as it navigates over this. So they're not taking a fast run through there, which is where we see that challenge. Now, these are one-way Copenhagen separated facilities. Where you go to two-lane, it becomes even more important to be very, very conscious of that entry and exit, because drivers entering and exiting are really looking for cyclists in only one direction, and they could be coming from either direction in those multi-directional facilities. So I like, at a very, very general rule of thumb guidance, multi-lane separated facilities only where there's next to no access points. Because if you've got access points, it's highly problematic. So when you have a shared path facility, dedicated cycle facility or a shared path facility, and you want it to cross a road, but you want to give it priority, so just putting the correct sign up, that was the incorrect sign, then this is how it would look. What you essentially do is create an intersection, and you give the shared path the priority, and you mark it like a normal intersection in the sense that you go give way sign to the road, because the other road, even though it's a shared path, has the priority. There's supplementary plate there of 2 pedestrians and cyclists is really just saying, that's who's coming, but it's trying to make it like an intersection. And there's an example from a driver's perspective approaching one of these. It's absolutely fascinating to try and do sight distance on these, because you really want to think about the speed of the cyclist coming in, the speed of the vehicle coming in, sight triangles, and then you do some factors on the different the different speed environment you're in. So there's some good documentation around how to do that. I won't go through it all now. As part of, I do that in the raised crossing design course, but it's something for us to be aware of as auditors. We do need to provide that. That's those sight triangles to ensure people have that time. And there from the rider's perspective, you can see they have the clear run. It's all nicely at grade for them, so they don't need to go down and up again, and that's a nice feature. You can though provide speed calming for riders approaching a crossing point like this, even if they have priority. So you could do things like rumble strips on the approach. You could do raised features. You could do the chicaning, which actually sometimes works quite nicely. And you can see in this one, they chicane in a little bit. They've over-exaggerated that. But, that it chicanes it in a little bit. Now, they're doing that partly to get enough distance set off here so vehicles can come in and store. It also just slows riders a little bit down. It's not a huge reduction in speed, but it's something to dampen speed a little bit at this conflict point. So local area traffic management. If you're given a local area traffic management scheme and you're undertaking a road safety audit of it, you're seeing benefits in slower vehicle speed, so speed humps, chicanes, things like one-way slow points. But one thing that can happen is that you squeeze cyclists in at some of these features. So a one-way slow point is a legitimate local area traffic management feature where you basically narrow the road so only one vehicle can fit through. And then you let the cars work it out. And they slow down and they, you go, okay, you go. And then occasionally they beep at each other. But a lot of common practice has been to do curb build outs and then the one-way slow point. Okay, that's great. But it does squeeze the cyclist in amongst this traffic. But this one you can see on screen now is quite an elegant feature in terms of it provides this cyclist bypass facility. So while the cars are, in there, the cyclists get their free run through. And that works also with chicanes and some other features where if you can provide that cyclist bypass facility, it's a really good treatment. All right, we just want to spend a little bit of time, pop your questions in the chat as we go though, a little bit of time talking about these shared path audits specifically, and then I'll give you your coffee break. But shared path audits, that you follow basically the same methodology as a road safety audit, except for you're going to get out there and you're going to ride. You're going to ride the route. This is me. I was out there with a colleague and we were, just a little sort of practical stuff. I put a dash cam on my bike. I'm carrying a electronic level to see how steep some of the grades of the path are going down. It also, I use that for height as well. You can see some of that underpass in the background. You check how high that is. I take photos on my phone. I use an app called Context Cam, but there's a few of them available, but it's something that you can take your photo. Of course, it's geotagged as pretty much any photo you take on your phone is, but it also gives you the ability to write some notes. I'll show you some of that in a minute. But some things we're considering out there: the widths of the path, obstacles, hazards, horizontal and vertical alignment, surface conditions, intersections. And let's start with those intersections. So where paths intersect, and you can see here's an example of a newly built one, which is just a bit confusing, isn't it? Who's got priority? And if this starts to get busy, you might just find a little bit of confusion there. There's an output of context scan, which, you can see path priority, when it was taken, direction, coordinates. And the good thing about this is that you've got, if you're doing a shared path, you've often got routes, the issues all the way along it, and you can sort of just drop all of these onto a mapping software, and it just lays them out as to where they are. And it's a nice thing and an easy thing to provide clients with that, and they can sort of work through them. We want to find good sight lines, warn of intersections, sign to help with that directional. Ideally 90 degrees, so there's the ability to see quite easily. And we have to reduce speed sometimes to manage it. So a fairly good just normal intersection principles really there. And we see it in shared paths. Here's another one, which is actually, it is quite confusing, this one, when you're out there, because the adjoining sort of footpath area down here has the consistent color with the shared path. And the path coming in here, well, that's actually the main bit of the path. And so it actually really does have priority, but it's really just awkward and unclear. And so something you'd pick up as part of a shared path audit and try to get some clarity. I mean, and that doesn't need to be expensive clarity really on this one. I mean, you could almost do that with a little bit of line marking there, couldn't you? And maybe a bit of a sign here or something. Give way could even go here, or even just a little bit of that, just so it just clears it up. Of course, we're thinking about hazards on the path as well, like off the path. So we think a lot about vehicles leaving the road, don't we? And what are the hazards when they leave the road? How close are the hazards? You need to think about the same for paths. And in fact, shared paths, there's a fair bit of leaving of the path because they have to avoid things like dogs and kids running out and people with, prams or not looking and the like. So pathside hazards are a significant thing to be aware of. And you can see this one's a big drop down into the channel there. We've got little drops, which will be enough to destabilize rider to there. Pathside hazards close to the edge of the path. So things within the path that may not be well lit, maybe something to catch a handlebar or a pedal on. Mud, debris, rocks, and the like, which we see a lot on shared paths. And I mentioned catching a handlebar or a pedal, and certainly fencing that is used and choice of fencing needs to be cyclist friendly in these shared paths or cycleway environments. So this one would snag a rider if they sort of went into it. Something like this is the cyclist friendly fencing, where it provides a longitudinal facility for a cyclist's shoulder or hip to run along, as opposed to snagging. So this job, there's been consideration to try to separate higher speed vehicles from shared path users and provide that protection, which is really nice thinking. The challenge does come about the fact that the back of this W-beam system does present continuous point source hazards for a rider that may fall onto those, or even a jogger or the like. So we want to have a think about that as well. You can provide a back-to-back system, as you can see in this one, where that's going to be a bit better. There are plastic products, there are post caps, there are ways to lessen that risk. But thinking about riders leaving the path and hitting things and trying to do the best we can there. Blocking off paths from vehicle access is something that does continue to need to be done, but how you do it is important. So this will certainly stop the vehicles getting in. It also stops the cyclists, especially at night where they can't see anything, and then they will hit it. And I think somebody's tied a bag there to warn other cyclists of the chain that's there. So you really want to delineate it with retroreflective delineation, make it clear if you are going to do that. I think this, if you did have a hazard in the path, is a really reasonable setup. They've line marked it on the approach. They've provided flexible bollards. So if a cyclist hit that, so it'll flex. They've got retroreflective tape, so that'll stand out at night. They've delineated the hazard. It's sort of as good as close to as good as you're going to get without actually getting rid of the cable stay out of the middle of the path, which would be the ultimate. So we do have a resource sheet about those specific cycling audits. We put that in the learning management system. You can have a read of it. If you're asked as a road safety auditor to do a cycling road safety audit, have a look at the sheet, check. It's pretty much what I've just gone through. Why don't we take our break, but also just put up a fun little 2-question poll there, again, not being marked on it, but just maybe something if you get back after you get your coffee on time, you can answer a couple of little questions. So the poll's just popped up on screen, 2 little questions. Let's take 4 minutes and fill your coffee up, and we'll get back into it, and we'll talk about motorcyclists. All right, let's get back into it. Final road user, the motorcyclist. The motorcyclist. Give us a thumbs up or something, or pop it in the chat if you're a motorcycle rider. Actually, we haven't ended the poll, have we?
No, I'll do that now. Sorry.
End the poll. So no, so I had it on the other screen, so I didn't see it.
Results are shared.
Thank you, everybody, for having a go at that. Which of the following is not a common cyclist requirement in infrastructure? Cadence. Everybody onto that. Cadence is a cycling term, but it's not really an infrastructure one. That's how quickly you rotate the pedals is your cadence. What is the name for a shared space arrow? A shared arrow. It is a sharrow. So almost everybody onto that one. Okay, let's get rid of that, Loretta. And back into motorcyclists. Here we go. So I was asking if anybody's a motorcycle rider. I'm a licensed motorcycle rider. I'm not an active rider. I got my license a long time ago in order to understand a little bit more about the needs of riders and get that sort of experience. But I don't ride anymore, that's for sure. But a little bit like the cycling module we just did, or cycling bit, we're going to talk about the requirements of motorcyclists for safe travel and pointing you at some technical information for motorcyclists. And we'll have a look at those common road safety audit issues for riders, for motorcycle riders, and some of the terminology and treatments. But one of the reasons I don't ride anymore, it's 20 to 30 times more likely to be killed as a motorcyclist than a car driver doing the same journey. 20 to 30 times more likely. That's astronomical. And it's a combination of vulnerability, as in physically being exposed to the energy, the impact energy and the like, and being able to do that at the speed of a car without the shell of protection. Then there's some other compounding factors there. You've got the fact that the rider is smaller, so it's hidden behind more objects. It's got inherent instability, being 2 wheels, The bike leans, or the rider leans to take a curve, thereby causing shift in the center of gravity. So we're sort of adding a lot of risk factors onto this. Some people often want to add in there the risk-taking riding behavior, but I always do remind people at that stage, but yeah, there's the risk-taking driving behavior as well, and walking behavior, and that is part of road user behavior. It's just that this one is in a form that's so much more vulnerable to injury and death. Well, I mean, pedestrians are, and push bikes are in the same vulnerability to death, basically. Well, not quite, but basically. But they just are not going at the speeds that these ones are. So back a long time ago, when I was working at Vic Roads, we decided to sort of analyze what specifics in terms of the design, the management, the operation and maintenance of the road network creates specific risks for motorcyclists above and beyond other road users. And we created the first ever Making Roads Motorcycle Friendly guide. And you can just Google Making Roads Motorcycle Friendly and it'll pop up with guides from your jurisdiction that they're all based off the original work that we did at Vic Roads. So the New South Wales and New Zealand one and Queensland one and everything like that, which is good because the principles are pretty good, and then they've used some local examples and the like. So I do point you at that as useful resources to understand a bit of those issues. But you'll see in all of those, we talk about sight, surface, sign, strike, and speed as ways to think about the risk for motorcycle riders. So can riders be seen, and can they see what's coming up? Has a surface been provided that is not going to make them lose control and is going to have good skid resistance if they need to brake or avoid? Have we got good signs to warn, inform, and guide and help a rider through the journey? When the crash happens, what will the rider hit, and how will they hit it, and or what will hit the rider? And what speed does all this happen at? And if we look at those 5 S's, and we go back to our understanding of risk, which, remember, road safety audit is a risk assessment as such, and we need to understand what is the likelihood of crash and what is the consequence or the severity of crash. When we take those 5 S's, we can sort of say, well, sight, surface, and signs, they're all going to impact on the chance a crash happens for a rider. The strike, what they're hitting, how they're hitting it, what it's made of, and all of those things, that's going to influence how bad the outcome is, the consequence of the crash. Speed is this magic thing that reduces both the chance of a crash if you lower speed and the severity of the crash, the outcome. So let's just use a bit of time here to go through these 5 S's and have put a few light bulbs on in thinking about motorcyclists in our road safety audits. I do need to make sure I give plenty of time for Loretta and myself to give you your audit and assignment. So I'll keep ticking along through this. So we're going to start with sight. So can that rider be seen? Can they see what's coming up? You see there, I mean, you've seen a lot of motorbikes and cars out there, but you see even, a small car is wider, significantly wider than a motorbike. And you can see there's chucked some safety margins on the outside of the standard thinking around a bike. That's pretty much just for the lean that the bike will take. Riders are a little bit taller in terms of eye height, which you occasionally could factor into sight distance thinking, but really it's a bit too nuanced. That's when you're sort of coming up with design guides and things like that. You can see here, I just snapped a photo at one point just to show a very small sign covering a fair bit of a rider just from that perspective. But we also want to think of the dynamic visual obstruction issues. Again, just a little photo showing a rider behind there. So turning vehicles may miss a rider or the like. But helping riders understand what's coming up is really important, especially on these popular motorcycle touring routes, and really providing that good guidance, advanced warning, curve advisories, and the like is an important part of ensuring no surprises for riders. This particular sort of curve setup is highly risky for motorcyclists. So it's where there's, it's usually on a popular motorcycle touring route or the like, and it's a curve that has one radius and then tightens up into a second radius. I'll give a prize if somebody can tell me the technical term for a curve that tightens like this. Interesting. Some of the road designers may know that one. But in this scenario, a rider will have to go onto the other side of the road because they enter the curve with a particular line and speed. And as it tightens up, they don't have the ability to navigate that. And they'll end up on the wrong side of the road. So Richard's gone with a spiral. A spiral slightly different. Spiral has a continually tightening radius of curve, but certainly a prize for that. So we're getting in the right, definitely in the right realm. The one which just has sort of two radiuses, we call a compound curve. And there you can see a compound curve, which goes from a 252 radius into a 117 radius. So it'll tighten up a bit. It's not the most dramatic tightening up of a curve, but it's certainly there. And 4 motorcycle runoff road crashes on the outside of curve. I think a compounding factor here, and there you go, I've used the term again. So a compounding factor on the compound curve is the entryway of the gravel road. So we've got this unsealed bell mouth where we're probably going to have, we have this gravel wash coming out here. So tightening up, and it's quite an issue there. So, and of course, just in case anybody is sort of new to some of this, we talk about how tight a curve is by the radius of the curve. I'm pretty sure you're all absolutely across that. So you'd essentially be trying to draw a big circle, and what's the radius of that curve? And then that one's a smaller circle, isn't it? So that dynamic visual obstruction, something we're interested in. So if you had a vehicle number 1 turning in, and you had a vehicle number 2 going straight through, a motorcyclist could be either of those, but which do you think, from analysing lots of these scenarios out there, do we see more motorcyclists, 1 or 2? Any thoughts on that? Pop it in the chat. Yeah, 2. Well done, everyone. Everybody's quick on that. And that's right. So the motorcyclists sort of hidden behind those other vehicles, the cars sort of turning in there. And this is, I mean, we see crashes like this for all vehicles, but the reason motorcycles are a bit more susceptible to this is the vulnerability of the rider. So when the crash happens, they're more likely to be injured. Plus also they're smaller and they're more hidden behind those other cars. That's actually a photo of that site that you can see that Pajero, the white Pajero turning in there, a truck, which is large, blocking all sight lines there. So if any motorcyclist was coming through, or probably any car was coming through, there'd be an issue. Again, here you can see the tree sort of covers the rider there. So, keeping sight lines open and just thinking about things that you may not usually consider as a sightline impediment, power poles, shrubs, signal controller boxes, things like that. They can block sight lines. And if we can keep those clear sight lines, we're in a good position. Okay, surface. I talked about the center of gravity of a rider shifting as they navigate through a curve or around a corner. And I think these pictures sort of demonstrate that a bit, where, the center of gravity is going to be shifted out. We're going to have all of the, we're going to have this heavy requirement of traction in order to keep the bike upright. So surface becomes this highly important aspect for riders, especially taking curves, going around corners. So motorcyclists called the canary in the coal mine when it comes to surface issues. They will be the first to be injured or killed when we have surface condition issues, especially on popular motorcycle routes. And the big particular points of concern are around curves and in braking zones. Diagram here, probably not exactly accurate in the lines you want to take as a rider, but braking zones, leaning zones. So we want that nice continuous surface, good skid resistance like this. Unfortunately, our road network is sort of littered with things like depressions. So that's where, it may not be a pothole, but it destabilizes the rider. We've done two big investigations, coronial investigations into crashes where motorcyclists on popular motorcycle touring routes have navigated around a curve, gone into a depression, which has destabilized them. They haven't come off the bike, but they've had to pull the bike upright, and the bike's entered into the opposing lane and they've been struck by a vehicle. Now, you can see here measuring the size of the depression under a 3-meter straight edge, which, a lot of the time they don't quite trigger intervention under the Road Management Act or the particular requirements. They're not quite deep enough. Those intervention levels and the like for road maintenance, they're very much set for cars, and certainly those popular motorcycle routes sometimes need a bit of enhanced thinking around that. These ones certainly they're within intervention level, potholes and the like, big, landslips and things that are going to be serious issues for riders. But even gravel, debris, wash onto the surface and riders leaning, it becomes slippery and losing traction and the like. Could be around work sites, could be around quarry sites and other areas. An interesting one, thinking about when patching is done and the like, we often think about the patches and where the seam is. And you can see this one, the seams just happen to be right in the riding line, which is a possible area things could break open and break up again. Ideally, you do full width patching. I know there's cost implications of it, but again, popular motorcycle touring routes can have a think about that. And this one's, the patch is failing here. This is a popular motorcycle touring route up in the Yarra Ranges, and a rider sort of coming around there. They're on a lean. They're going through at a certain line at a certain pace. If they encounter this as a surprise, really they have options, which is A, to go around it, and they'll probably have to go on the other side of the road, or they pull the bike up and they go through it, which will direct them out onto the other side of the road. They don't really have the option to go inside it. The physics of that doesn't work. So if you have scenarios where you identify these sorts of things, you're suggesting immediate warning of this. So there's no surprises for the rider. But then obviously you're going to try and rectify that. But early warning is important. Carrying on the surface challenges, I mean, the use of steel plates and the like in temporary works is commonplace. They become very slippery when they're a bit wet, and motorcyclists can come off. You might think, oh, it's pretty obvious, and they'll be very careful there. Well, they might be traveling behind another vehicle. They might be at night and a bit harder to see. So we want to think about surface treatments for those if we need to have them there. So there's an example of surface treatment, which is it's a skid resistant surface that you can put on top. This one, the bolts seem to be coming up a little bit, but it's got a bit more grip. It's actually quite well highlighted as well. Ideally, you don't have them in the middle of the road though. In fact, you don't really want anything in the road surface. Here's one in New Zealand, which has got sort of your service pit in the middle of the circulating carriageway, which is a point of riders slightly leaning. They're also looking at, scanning for traffic that's about to jump out into them, and being really aware of that. So it adds that complication. Now, you do see often roundabout designs where services are still remaining in the roundabout because that sort of major service relocation can be an expensive and challenging exercise. That's where, again, as auditors of the design phase, we can start to see if we can encourage these are relocated outside of the circulated carriageway. And of course, to improve the surface, there's all of our standard maintenance activities, but increasing skid resistance through water blasting or other skid resistant surface treatments is a very beneficial thing. It can help riders maintain traction, and if they need to brake hard, they'll get more traction, as will other vehicles for that matter. There's also the skid resistance sort of surface treatments you can use. Different ones available, which are really grippy and give great traction. Here you can see it used through the intersection and the approach to the intersection, which are the points where a rider would be slamming on the brakes or trying to avoid a car that's entered the intersection. It's not being used on the exit, which is the low risk point. So we like to seal right up to the barrier system, so riders have the best chance of staying on the bike and recovering. As soon as a rider hits an unsealed surface, they're in huge trouble. Okay, a couple more things, and we're just going to run through here. Curbing. So basics on curbing. We've got different curb types. We've got a barrier curb, which is essentially like that there. You got sort of mountable curbing and semi-mountable curbing, which is more got that ability for a vehicle to mount it. Now, the more mountable, the better, because a rider's just got a little bit of opportunity to navigate it, to recover. As soon as they hit a barrier curb, they're off the bike. The car will hit a barrier curb and just jump up it, but the rider will be off the bike. So some basic principles are try to be as mountable as possible with your curbing. Of course, for drainage purposes and the like, you might need to select barrier curbing, but whatever curbing it is, you want to have it highlight and contrast so the riders can see it. So making sure it's a different color is really useful. Here's a little video of, well, I wouldn't call this the, I think they've actually done a really good job of highlighting the curb and things here, but it's just more to show you the very small lip that destabilizes a rider. So hopefully that's now streaming through for you. So you can see pretty small lip there, destabilizes the rider. They're now off the road and they hit the grab rail, which is essentially where like a cycling path crosses the road, and it's a thing that a cyclist can grab and not have to unclip their pedals and the like. I showed that in New Zealand not too long ago, and they said, "Hey, bro, have a look at our grab rails. We're using PVC piping." Which I thought was interesting. I don't know how it'll last with, UV light and or sunlight and the like. But anyway, they said it'll break away if a motorcyclist hits it. The next one, thinking about the surface, is the use of thermoplastic line marking. So we use big sways of thermoplastic line marking sometimes, and that is a skid resistance issue for a motorcyclist. The line marking companies will say to you, "Oh no, it's got just as good skid resistance as the surface." And well, they're right when it's first applied, but as it wears down over time and polishes up and then gets a bit of moisture on it, it's a pretty slippery surface for motorcyclists. Also, cyclists are the same. So we don't want to use large sways of line marking where it's not necessary. And if there's alternate ways to do that, that's pretty important. One thing you'll probably discover if you get into a lot of road safety auditing is some pretty big thermoplastic line marking proposals. One that I've seen a handful of times in my career is let me just draw it for you on here. So you've got your classic crossroad, kind of like what we looked at in some of the early modules. And you've got this overshoot problem. So vehicles overshooting and crashing. And their proposal, amongst other things, maybe they're doubling up their stop signs or give way signs. They're putting some rumble strips up here on the approach, try and alert, and then they propose to paint a big give way sign here or a big stop sign here or something like that, just to really enhance. This is the point. Well, a motorcyclist approaching that, well, they may also be subject to this see-through effect, and they'll be slamming on the brakes right there. And we've just introduced a skid resistance issue right at the most critical point for the rider. Signs. So there are particular motorcycle warning signs. These are used varying amounts in different jurisdictions. They're certainly out there for trial. I was checking with my colleague Tuan, who's the chair of the Australian Standards Committee for Signs, the 1742 series, whether this was in the Australian Standard. He said not at the moment, but it's something they're looking at. So, but a lot of jurisdictions do use it to highlight a specific issue for motorcyclists. You can see a few of them used and installed here. A rough surface, loose stones. So you may think, well, why put up a sign? Why not just remove the loose stones? Well, this is usually in that period. The rough surface one, they're having some major pavement failures or whatever it is, so warning riders, and then when they rectify that, they remove it. The loose stone ones in this particular situation is associated with there's a quarry down the road, and it keeps gravel keeps washing out onto the road. So, trying to work with the gravel, the quarry, and try and improve that, but also warning riders that this could be coming up. But of course, any warning sign to alert of any issues, any surface issues is important. Strike. Okay, now we're into riders hitting stuff. And we know riders leave the road on these popular touring routes, motorcycle routes, outside of curve. Outside of curve is the most problematic spot for motorcyclists. And here's an example, again, in New Zealand, where we can see there's a bit of surface issue. And so a rider may leave the road, and then on the outside of the curve there, you can see those, concrete blocks. So that's not going to be good for, it's not going to be good for cars, but it's going to be particularly dangerous for motorcyclists. So we want to be really alert of that. But even your normal standard galvanized steel poles, which we deem frangible. Deem frangible means they break away on impact. Well, they're frangible for cars and trucks. They're certainly not frangible for a motorcyclist hitting it. A motorcyclist striking a galvanized steel frangible pole, it's strong enough to kill the motorcyclist. So what we want to do there is start to think about that as we analyze sites. Like, these are particular point source hazards for motorcyclists. All these poles, all these poles. The bigger ones, the power poles, that's going to be a point source hazard for everyone. But, can we consolidate some of this? Can we remove some of this? And can we lessen the risk in that perspective? And in some situations, you may elect to use a flexible sign range. We have those currently for low mount signs where they're flexible. Higher signs, nobody's come up with anything yet. We're working with Swinburne University on trying to work something out that holds up to the massive torque loads of wind on higher signs, that is weak enough at the base to shear for a motorcyclist, yet strong enough to hold up to that wind load. It's quite the engineering challenge, but it's a bit of fun. But there are these low mount flexible sign ranges available, which are deemed as motorcycle friendly. Remembering that riders lean when they go around a curve, thinking about the placement of road furniture, fences, seats, bus shelters, these sorts of things, that riders could collide with them. I suspect this will be taken out by a truck before it is taken out by a motorcyclist, but something for us to think about. And there's just a staged photo with a Wally of a rider sort of leaning around a curve, coming close to some signage there. Now, when we're thinking about strike hazards, we think about vehicles leaving the road and we put barriers in to lessen the severity of that impact. And these barrier systems are very particularly designed, but they are designed for cars and trucks. They're not designed for motorcyclists. We know that about half the riders that strike a barrier system are off their bike already. They're sliding on the ground. They hit the base of the barrier system. The other half is upright and they go over the top pretty quickly. They don't run along this like a car. So for those ones that are sliding, we can use an underrun protection, some sort of rub rail, NPR, biker shield. There's lots of ones available. So the rider hits this and slides along it rather than hitting one of those posts and abruptly stopping. So you can imagine a rider sliding along at 60 kilometers an hour. So they've come off the bike, they're sliding, they hit the base here, they hit one of the posts. That's pretty much death for the rider. If we put the underrun protection in, they'll slide along that. It's not going to be a friendly thing to happen, but it'll be far more survivable than the individual post. And there you can retrofit. So if you're doing an audit, you can suggest retrofitting rub rail to existing barrier systems, or if you're putting new barrier systems in, they can have that. So here's a motorcycle crash test dummy striking a post at 60 kilometers an hour. This is the European crash test protocol for motorcycles and barriers. That kills the rider, but then if you have underrun protection, it enters into survivable territory. That's a pass. Bear in mind, this is a 60 kilometer per hour impact. So there are limitations on this. It's a 60 kilometer crash test. It's got that bit of cushioning. It's got the redirective properties. So that's pretty favorable. You can see here the application of underrun protection. So that one's MPR, motorcycle protection rail, on Type B W-beam in Victoria, or G4 system in other jurisdictions. And you can see they've added the underrun protection. Well, question for the learned group we have here: why'd they stop there? Why didn't they just continue it on to the end? It seems a bit odd to just stop there. Any ideas on that? While I have a sip of my coffee, which is now cold. No ideas? Not quite yet. There we go. Joel and Mal about the same time, and Riette. So it's the N terminal, that's right. And could impact the operations of it. So, Loretta, I think 3 prizes there just for fun. This is a different part of the barrier system. That's the end terminal. That's the barrier system. Actually, technically, there's a transition there, but anyway, it doesn't matter. So this functions, it concertinas on itself when struck from the end, and nobody knows exactly how it would function if that was added to it. Nobody's done that testing, and so we don't want to compromise the safety of other road users. So what you would suggest is actually just to extend the barrier system to a point where you're happy that you've covered off the tangent that a rider would be able to strike. Now, why rope safety barrier systems? Like, there's a very small lingering few in the motorcycle community that jump up and down and call this the cheese cutter and going to kill riders and the like. Well, the reality is that motorcyclists striking this barrier system are in the same trouble as striking any other barrier system, or actually not having a barrier system and then them going to the other side of the road or striking the rocks or trees or anything behind it. The wires don't slice the rider at all. If a rider hits it upright, they go over the top. The rider hits the base of this, they hit the posts as well. We have trialed stack cushions, cushioning, post protectors around the post. I mean, I'm not as excited by this. I mean, they are something, kind of like football goalpost padding, but it's certainly not going to be as effective as a proper underrun protection. The reality these days is, though, that if you have a wire rope safety barrier system and you have determined as a road safety auditor, or, they're proposing a central wire rope safety barrier system like this, and you as a road safety auditor say, I suggest you do things to decrease the motorcycle risk here, which this one's on the South Gippsland Highway on the approach down to the motorcycle Grand Prix, so it gets lots of riders. Like, to me, my recommendation would be consider flexible W-beam with motorcycle underrun protection, back-to-back W-beam system every time. Like, there was a time back in the day, and in fact, when this project was designed, that wire rope versus a type B or a G4 W-beam system were poles apart in terms of the safety outcomes you'd get for all road users. So you do everything you can to get that wire rope system in. But nowadays, it's flexible W-beam is such a great barrier system that you just jump to that. A little bit of installation challenges. Some people put the underrun protection incorrectly straight onto the post. It needs a bracket to kick it out. Otherwise, you've got these sharp bits and you've got areas where a leg or an arm can go through and get snagged. And so you really want to just fit it as per manufacturer's instructions. Thinking about gaps, running into concrete structures and these sort of things is something else to have a think about. Speed. So speed is a hugely important thing for riders, as it is for other road users. But if we can influence speed, we can lessen the chance of a crash and we can lessen the severity of outcomes. So we have many, many ways to do this on popular touring routes, providing advanced warning sign, providing curve guidance so riders know how sharp it is and adjust their speed. Bear in mind, with galvanized steel posts, we're putting fixed hazards on the outside of curve as well here. So you might be reducing the chance of crash and possibly increasing severity. So be careful as you do that. But certainly the speed advisory signs, giving good warning, showing riders what's coming up. And motorcycle audits. And again, a little bit like that cycling audit, except for you often need to bring in a rider because nobody in the team is a rider or has that expertise. So you work with the rider, they tell you what they're seeing and feeling and the like, and you often kit up the rider, have a following trailing car, and the rider maybe is talking to the car behind through a radio system, or you record it all and you get all of their thoughts and feelings. This one finding is actually about the exposed back of posts. So if, imagine if a motorcyclist was coming along here and a car changed lanes in front of them and pushed them into the barrier system, that would be a very sharp snagging point for a rider. And we've got another thematic fact sheet for you if you want to jump into that at any point. Now, I don't think I'm going to go into the case studies, Loretta, because I want to ensure we've got enough time to show everybody their assignment. And just because I thought that that might be the case, I pre-recorded some case studies and I popped them into the learning management system. If you want to watch a little bit of the case studies, you can watch some short videos on those case studies, which we'll have in the learning management system for you. Pop any questions you do have into the chat, but over to you, Loretta. Look, you're in the learning management system. I can see that.
Thank you. Well, they are there, the case studies. So if you want to see Ken without the iconic mustache, you can view them there. And some other videos as well that Ken referred to throughout this session. So we are on module 4, as you know, but the tasks for today. So firstly, there is a quiz. I know you know how to do the quizzes by now. You have done a couple already. So ensure that you submit that quiz. Couple of things that are important for you. There's this, what we call the SWIMS document. So ensure that you are clicking on here and reading through that. And of course, agreeing that you have read that. So make sure that you click on the agreement and it is set up like a quiz. So just answer that question there. Most importantly is the site visit. So I'll just bring this up and then Ken can go through it in more detail. So I'll just give you the gist of this section here. So you have all been allocated a site. So there is a PDF with your name at the end. So open that up and ensure you're following the directions on that. There is the template that you need to fill out. So once we open that template, hopefully it loads up for me. Once you open this template, this is the one you actually need to fill out. It's just loading up. And once you've done that, we will go through it. But once you have done this template, you need to then save it as a PDF. Save it as a PDF in order to submit it. So clicking in here, add your submission and drag and drop or upload the file here and save those changes. So that's how you submit your assignment. It is due on Thursday, the 20th of June as well. So ensure you get that in time. A note here, if you are from Transport for New South Wales, if you can't submit it, please email it to me. So the email at training. Also, if there's a couple of you that have been allocated the same site address, it's really important that you complete your own report. So yes, you can discuss things together, but please ensure that you are, submitting your own unique report. So that's that part I think I've covered there. Ken, would you like to run through the template?
Yeah, actually, maybe before we do the template, do you just want to click on somebody's design just to show them
for sure
what they might see? Because as you do that, I want to remind them, and I've said this a few times. Okay, so there's a good example. It's currently a roundabout, and it looks like the proposal is to make it a signalized intersection. Remove the roundabout and turn it into a signalized intersection. You are undertaking a road safety audit on the signalized intersection, the design, not what's currently there, the roundabout, okay? The reason we go to the site is to look at how does it currently operate? What road users are there? Where are they crossing? How does this design, how are they going to, when they build this, what are some of the areas, what are some of the challenges? We are undertaking a road safety audit of the design. Okay, good, thank you. So you'll find one of those and it'll have some notes on it. So what we are going to ask you to do then is to fill out anything that is highlighted. So you're going to put in that title there, and then you're going to go down and any abbreviations that you've used. So then, your name and where the audit is, and replace that map with yours. And so we've tried to make this as easy as we can. we do encourage, like you, when you're doing real audits, you can use this template as well. Rebrand it, put your own branding on it, change the colors, do whatever you want. Just be consistent with the headings. Sorry, go back up a little bit there, Loretta. So, yeah, the purpose of the report and the scope and limitations, again, you're not adding much apart from, which is this location. Then we get into guidance, and that's just general text, which is in everybody's road safety audit all the time. It's just there to ensure that a receiver of this report knows what this is. If they've never seen an audit before, they can read this and understand it. Okay, let's keep going down. Good stuff. Okay, now, this is good practice always to put in information about the drawings and the plans you're given. For this one, you might just say, no number provided or the like, but they're in there. Then down a bit is where you put the audit team. Now, you're going to put your name in there. You can put your employer if you want, or you can, but for this one, we've got you as road safety auditor in training. Okay, down at 3.4, we see a little description of what's currently there. What are the existing condition? What's the environment there? And what do you know about it? Go down a little bit further. Now, for this, and we're going to ensure you're safe when you're out there, and I think we've got a safe work method statement, which we'll talk to you about after I'm finished, which is we're not going to let you go out there at night, or going out there at night is not part of this. Each of the sites we've selected for you, we've done a desktop risk assessment on, in the sense that we've identified that it can be done safely. It's low risk site, as long as you're not out there measuring lane widths and those sort of things, spending time on the road. You don't need to. You stand back, you observe, you have a look at it. It's all very much fine. But you put in there the daytime inspection when you went out there. In a real one, you'd add in more information. Okay, so then the risk assessment is there so you can look back and make sure you allocate risk accordingly. Let's keep going down. A bit on the severity stuff and a bit on primary and supporting treatments. Now, you get to this part, which is part 4, and you can see there that we're talking about an Appendix B. Now, Appendix B is actually where the bulk of the audit is. It's the table of findings. This you'll fill out after you've done all of that, which is just some overarching comments. What were the big risk items? What were the big concerns and the like? But you'll fill that out last. Okay, let's go a bit further down. So again, you'll do this after you're all happy with it, but you sign off an audit. It's a formal document, so you sign it and you date it. In a normal audit, you'll put photos of the site, lots of photos of the site. For this one, for the purposes of training, we just want one photo. And that photo is to be you on the site wearing a high-vis vest, right? And so we are required, as part of this official course, to make sure that you went to a site, as in you've been through this practice of auditing, going to the site, looking at it, looking at a design, imagining it built, looking at land use and pedestrian desire lines and activity. So because we do this online, we can't be out there on site with you. We need you to prove to us that you went there. So there you go, example of me out there in New South Wales looking at a big school speed zone. And this is it. This is where you're going to spend the bulk of your time, the findings and recommendations. So we have written an example up there. Okay, that's an example, just so you can see the sort of stuff we'd be expecting. So that's your example. But then we want you to now do 3. We want you to write them out in full. 3 different issues. Put a snip of the design, add a photo from the site, whatever it is. Put the risk rating, color the cell, the color for that appropriate risk based on the risk matrix. Put your recommendation in there, categorize it. Don't put anything in the client response because you're not the client. You're the auditor now, right? The responsible officer, you leave that blank. Flesh them all out. And then that is what we're looking for. Just 3, okay? If you do 25, the markers are going to mark the first 3 and that's it, right? Yeah, you're wasting your time doing all of those other ones. Unless you're really just loving it and you want to get into the practice of it, that's fine. But no, they won't be marked. Just 3 will be marked. Okay. So once you've finished all that, you're happy with it, you're going to save it, you're going to PDF it. And as Loretta showed you, you're going to drop it into the learning management system. Now, let's just briefly do the safety. Did we do that already?
I touched on it. Let me just go back. The agreement.
Yeah. So we've just got this little quiz, which is one question, which says, I've had a look at the safe work method statement and I agree to act safely out there in accordance with the safe work method statement. The safe work method statement, basically, it's pretty basic in the sense of it says, I'm not going to go out there intoxicated. I'm going to wear a high-vis vest. If I have to travel 12 hours to get to this site, I'll take fatigue breaks. Ridiculous, because if you had to travel 12 hours, if you had to travel 2 hours to get to the site, you would simply email Loretta and say, hey, have you got a site closer to me, please? Absolutely. Occasionally somebody's moved or they're traveling or something and we need to do that, and that's fine. We'll make that happen. But some basic stuff. But we do need to ensure that you are safe when you go out there. So just have a look at that, please, and agree to that. In our last minute here, I just want to remind you that don't stress out about this. If you are at all concerned, worried about it, don't understand something, not sure what you have to do, organize a meeting with one of our senior road safety auditors who will help you through this. So all you need to do is email Loretta or email the training at Safe System Solutions. They'll say, yep, no worries. We'll set you up a time to talk to one of the coaches and they'll help you. They'll help you in the structuring of it. If you can't find issues, which I doubt, I'm sure you'll be able to find issues. They could point you at areas to look at and things to think about. They'll show you the prompt lists from the guide, which will help you in that thinking. But we're here to support you through this. So don't stress about it. Just get in and get some assistance if you need to be helped along the journey. You remember, you get to resubmit. If you don't do so well, you get to resubmit it. You got 3 attempts at this. Now, you've got a bit of time for this one. It's 2 weeks, I think, before it's due. But I really encourage you to get onto it now. Like, download everything, have a look at it, and start the ball rolling. Next week, in a week's time, we're going to have a final session. I've got lots of time allocated for discussion. So if you want to discuss any of the writing of an audit or any of your specifics on the site, we'll discuss that. We'll discuss it live. It's more of a meeting session, so you'll be there and able to talk and everything like that. And we will we'll be able to jump into that. So get stuck into it. You can't pass the course without finishing this, so might as well do it. And
we'll announce those winners from Research One Topic, which will be marked by then. So
yes.
yeah,
the
we'll
deliberation, it's hard. The proposal was give everybody a prize, but we said no, we're gonna narrow it down. All right, that's ticked over time. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
See you next week.
Thanks, Ken. Bye.